Right. Good evening. Welcome everyone to the first in-person GDG hosted by Kasna. And thanks to Matt, thanks to Google for hosting it, for the nice place, nice studio here. So how are you all feeling? All good? Loaded up with some food, drinks? Excellent. Great. So today we have this very first GDG of this year. The theme is big data, analytics and stuff. So we've got a nice demo on big data and streaming data from Adhish, and then a great demo on Looker from Asuka. And then Banky will also have a little lightning talk. But first, who are we? We are Kasna. We are a premier Google partner. We have offices all over Australia, and we also have offices in New Zealand. And we do pretty much everything under the sun, but only Google Cloud. And we are part of a larger firm called Mantle Group. We have other brands as well, which are focused on other cloud platforms and other streams of work like data science. But from Kasna, we are just Google. And we love data, we love apps, we love automation, we love everything that devs love. Cool. Off to Banky.
How we going, guys? Yeah, so as you would have heard from Dean, my name's Steve Bancroft. Everyone calls me Banky. I'm a senior cloud engineer at Kasna. And I run a podcast. I host and produce the only Google Cloud-focused podcast in Australia and New Zealand. Myself and my co-host Dave Wall. As you can see, it's called GCP Life. The podcast's been running for about 18 months, and we release a show every 2 weeks. You'll hear everything from the latest on Google Cloud, the latest security problems that are going on. Been a lot of talk about AI lately and ChatGPT, primarily because Google seems to be behind the 8 ball on that one. It's kind of dragging the chain. And so this week's actually going to be a security special because you've seen a lot of breaches happen in the last 2 weeks. And we've got, actually in the next month or so, we've got a special guest coming on the show from the US, so make sure you listen out for that. And then later on towards the end of the year, there will actually be a special event here in this theatre as well. So you guys have got the scoop on that. So if you listen to the show, you'll find out all about that. So follow the hashtag GCP Life. I usually, that QR code there will take you to the actual Kasna page, where you'll find the show information. And you'll find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts as well. Good. Hope you enjoy your night, guys. Thanks for listening.
Hey everyone, just to add a note, the GCP Live podcast gets released once every fortnight, so forgot to mention that, Banky. It's written there, okay. All right, so today's first talk is about blending multimodal data in GCP. What is it? Before that, a quick intro about me. My name's Adhish. I'm a senior cloud engineer at Kasna. Started off as a software developer, started doing cloud engineering after that, and then getting more and more into data engineering. Passionate about all things public cloud, serverless technologies and building APIs for me. That's always been my passion and will be for a long time, I hope. Outside of work, I love running, so I love running half marathons, trying to get better at running marathons as well. Love hiking and spend a lot of time doing photography as well. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, that's my QR code over there, so feel free to connect if you want. All right, so let's get started with the talk. So what is data blending, right? So your data can come from multiple channels or modes. You've got bulk or batch data coming from files. You've got streaming and real-time data coming from APIs and feeds, and you've also got intermittent data, right? Like things like comments in a blog post. You don't know when you're going to get those bits of data. It's generated from websites, mobile apps, IoT devices, and multiple other workloads. And capturing and processing data is always a high priority because it's also one of the biggest challenges. And the biggest challenge we face is that data from all these different sources is not often in a format that is conducive for analysis or for effective use. So what do we do, right? Like, do we write a pipeline for every single source of data? Like, that becomes quite unmanageable, right? So you've got batch data, streaming data, intermittent data. Do we actually write pipelines for every single kinds of data source? It becomes quite unmanageable, lots of overhead. What if there's a better way? What if we can use ingestion as a module that is consistent for all sources of data, right? You have data coming through different sources. There's an ingestion module that does enrichment, business logic, and then puts it in a data sink. And that is what data blending is in a nutshell. You've got one ingestion module that handles multiple sources of data and then puts it out in a sink, which can later be analyzed for value. All right, so how do we do data blending? Multiple ways now you can do in Google Cloud. You can use things like Cloud Run, Cloud Functions, or any other tool, but we'll focus on Dataflow today. What is Dataflow? It's a serverless, fast, and cost-effective service which allows which supports both streaming and batch processing. It's written in Apache Beam, so it's portable. So all you have to do is write your code in Python or Java, deploy it as a Dataflow job, and then it handles all things like auto-scaling, monitoring, security for you off the shelf. In terms of data sources that Dataflow supports pretty much everything that is available in GCP. Got things like, you can get the data sources from BigQuery, Cloud Storage, Data Store, PubSub, etc., and then put a sink to, again, BigQuery, Cloud Storage, all those sorts. And like I mentioned, you've got logging, monitoring, error reporting, all of that stuff. And then you can also integrate with Vertex AI notebooks for your machine learning workloads. What we'll go through in this demo today will be an architecture something like this. So like I talked previously, there's multiple sources of data coming through. So you've got your mobile devices, streaming data, or batch and bulk data. It goes through multiple streams. So I've simulated some of this data through functions, webhook, or like a containerized file loader. For this case, I've just written a file loader in my laptop. Or you can put message directly through a PubSub. The uniform bit is the streaming data flow pipeline. So it takes data from all these different sources, does some business logic, and then spits it out in a BigQuery table, right? So we've also got like 2 BigQuery tables, just to simulate like business logic. We might get valid and invalid data, right? So based on certain logic, we're going to put it in valid warehouse or invalid warehouse. So that's what we're going to go through. So if I could change my share screen. One sec. I want to mirror displays. All right, so as based on this architecture, I've already deployed our PubSub, Cloud Functions, Dataflow, and BigQuery. So if we go through those bits here, you can see I've got a BigQuery table, 2 tables for BigQuery here. So I've got the transponder heartbeat and invalid transponder. So what I'm trying to do is simulate cell tower data coming through these multiple streams and then into BigQuery. So I've got the BigQuery schema looks like this. You've got timestamp ID, location, status, all of that stuff, as any cell tower would send. Got the same schema for my invalid BigQuery table as well. I've also got a pub sub topic called cell tower heartbeat. So this will receive all data through the different forms and send it to Dataflow. And I've also got the Dataflow job. So in the Dataflow job, as you can see, it's got the different steps clearly outlined for us. So we're going to pull message from the pub sub. We're going to parse the message, extract geolocation, and then separate it out based on some business logic, whether it's valid or invalid. So how have we set this up, right? So what I've done is, if you look at, is that visible at the back? All good? Is that better? Bigger? Is that better? All right. All right, so we've created the, so like with any services in GCP, you can create that through your console, APIs, or CLI. So I've just used the CLI, created the BQ tables here, then created a pub sub, and I've set up the data flow with auto scaling. So you've got the min number of workers to be 1 and max workers to be 5. So we'll go through how that really helps us later in the demo. So what I'll do first is actually, if you have a look at this architecture, I'm going to go through the function webhook and see how that data can be streamed to BigQuery. So to do that, I'm just going to open up another console and then go to Cloud Functions. So I've written this quick and dirty Cloud function to essentially publish some messages into my pub sub, and we've kind of rigged it a little bit to always send an ID with this format here, and we've got some kind of valid and invalid data in the payload. So if I send if I trigger this function, so if I send no payload, it just assumes it's a valid data, right? So it's currently running. It's complete. So if I go to BigQuery now and go to my saved queries, because I don't want to do all live demo. If I query my invalid transponder heartbeat for this ID, right now there should be nothing. Right? But remember, we sent a valid data, so it should actually go in the valid transponder. So as you can see, this was this ID here. Sorry, this ID here came from the Cloud Functions, went to the pub sub, went through the data flow pipeline, got validated, got enriched, and then into BigQuery within seconds, right? Same thing if I do it with a invalid payload. What is validation? Invalid. If I do it with an invalid payload and run this again. It's been published, so if I go and query my invalid table, you can see that it's here now, because again, it's gone through that pipeline, did the validation, and into BigQuery. Now, that's one form of data, right? Now, let's look at something like a streaming data. So right now, if I go to BigQuery and do a count on my table, it will show me 3 rows of data. I did a couple of rows just before the demo started, so that just to validate everything was working, right? So if I go back and run a heartbeat simulator, so what I've done here is written this, never-ending for loop which will publish my messages to PubSub straight away, which will then again trigger the data flow pipeline. And I've also set up the frequency. So when I say one, it's one message per second. So if I am to run this, Python cell tower heartbeats simulator py, it should start publishing messages into the PubSub. Now, if I do a count here of my transponder heartbeat dataset, it should start increasing now. It's getting data, right? So it's really real-time data. You're getting real-time data, and it's getting into a warehouse in real time. Like no lag, no nothing, straight to your warehouse. So that's another form of data. Now, we're going to look at two things at the same time next. So I'm going to dump a big chunk of data next. So I've got a file with 10K rows of data. I'm going to run this. And also what I'm going to do is bump up the cell tower heartbeat to 100,000. 100,000. So run this. And in my next terminal, I'm going to run this Python bulk heartbeat loader. So this is putting 100,000, 10,000 bits of data. This is streaming heaps of data into data flow. And let's just, for good measure, let's do another bit of simulation, right? So we're streaming a lot of data into data flow. What does data flow do, right? Let's have a look. So, as you can see now, it's very small. Your data flow is going to get a lot of data. So remember how I talked about monitoring? So if I start looking at job metrics, you can see that your throughput's going to start going to go through the roof, essentially. Let's increase this to. That's fine. If you have a look at the job graph, you're going to see that there's lots of data coming through. And if I go to BigQuery, remember how the count was 14? If I do this again, it's going to take some time because we've got a lot more data now. We're up to in the thousands, right? So you can see how the data flow is processing both the bulk load and the streaming at the same time and spitting it out into BigQuery. Now, what I really wanted to show was see how now you can actually see the backlog of your messages as well. So because we started off with one computer, one virtual machine, and we're spitting out so much data, there's a big backlog here. Like we've got nearly 2,000 elements in our queue, which hasn't been processed yet. So what does data flow do then? Is it basically starts doing this auto scaling where we've set the max number of compute engines to be 5. So it starts spinning up more computers so that we can handle the workload. And how we can see this, sometimes it does take time for data flow to automatically auto scale. But if you see over here, we've got 5 worker nodes. So this was a quick demo I did before the session so that we've got something to refer to if the auto scaling didn't work straight away. But as you can see here, like my throughput was really going up through the roof because I was pumping in so much data, right? So because of that, at the same time, if you look at the auto scaling bits, you can see that the number of nodes have gone from 1 to 2 to 5, and then I shut down one of the heartbeats, right? And then it started going down again. And that's because data flow is smart enough to say, I'm getting a lot of data, I need to handle this, so I need more computers. So it's doing that horizontal auto-scaling for you. And, in that way, you don't have to worry about your operational costs, operational overhead, where you don't want like 10 servers running all the time, right? When you don't get a lot of data, you can just have one server going on. Another great thing with this is you can get like really detailed logs for everything. So for each of these jobs, I can see how they're performing, how each of the metrics look for each of the jobs. But also, if I go here, it will give me different workers as well. So if I go to auto scaling, it will give me the different kinds of worker nodes, its history. So as you can see, it's saying auto scaling raised the number of workers to 5. So that's happened just now. So it's just increased the number of worker nodes from 1 to 5. So if I refresh this screen, I should see that bump. There you go. So the number of nodes has increased to 5 because we're pumping in so much data and it couldn't handle with one computer. So that's essentially a quick demo about how you can get data from multiple sources, blend it in, and put it in a data sink, right? So if I go to BigQuery again and query this, you'll see that the data volume will be very high. We're into 300,000s now. So, what I've just shown is your typical ETL pipeline. You're getting data from a source, you're doing some transformations, and you're loading to a BigQuery, right? To a data sink of some sort, BigQuery for us. But sometimes we actually don't want to do this, and we want to focus on ELT. So we want to get data and load it to a sink straight away, and then do transforms later on. That's not always a desirable way to do things. Like if you have PII data, you don't want to store that, right? But if you don't have PII data, it actually can be easier to just load the data straight to a data sink. And it's really easy. I can show you that in 5 minutes, right? So I can create a BigQuery table here, create a table, empty table. Table name is, let's say, ELT data. Create the table. So I've got the ELT data table. What I do need for this is a field called data. Save. Now what I'm going to do is create a pub sub topic. So let's create a new topic called ELT. This ELT is fine. Let's not create a default subscription and create. All right, so I can just, through the console itself, create a system that exports my data to BigQuery. So using PubSub, dump it to BigQuery. Dataset is the cell tower metadata. Table is ELT. Subscription ID is ELT sub. Let's not worry about all the nitty-gritty details, but what's it saying? ELT data, yes, thank you. All right, so I've created a ELT PubSub, ELT data subscription, and if I go to BigQuery right now, let's go to BigQuery. and look at the ELT data table and do a quick query on this. Let's do a select star, because why not? It's going to be empty, right? But if I go back here and let's stop this, let's do ELT, let's publish 1 per second. So if I go here and then run this again, so what I'm doing is I'm actually publishing to the new pub/sub topic that I just created. And if I do this now, it will start streaming that data. Oh, wrong one. Cell tower simulator.py. So it's publishing that message, and if I go to BigQuery and query this again, there is no data yet, which is a shame. There you go. It's getting data straight through from pub/sub to BigQuery. So, when making that decision of do I want ELT or ETL, you really think about, what kind of data do I have? Do I want to do transforms before I load it to the data warehouse or after I load it to the data warehouse, right? So all comes into consideration when you make a decision for your business, but at the end of the day, all the features are available through serverless technologies in GCP. You can, after you load it to BigQuery, you can push that through a data flow pipeline if you really want to, or you could, do DBT, whatever you want to do, right? So lots of possibilities and lots of ways you can manage your data and bring it to a state which can be analyzed and enriched in different ways. And yeah, that's it for today. Any questions? Go for it.
Okay, so I played around with Composer.
Yeah.
I know
Mine.
it's different, but there are some similarities, I think. Can you compare them? How do they differ? Should I repeat it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've played around with Composer, which is basically Apache Airflow as opposed to Beam.
Yeah.
How do they compare? Like I saw you essentially have a DAG as well, like all the steps in data flow. So is it the same thing? Is it different? Can you tell me more about it?
It's a great question. Unfortunately, I haven't played around with Composer. So have you played around with Composer? Or there's other answers over there from Aska as well?
So Composer, based out of Airflow. So the Composer is meant to be an orchestrator. It's not meant to do ETL or ELT. So I liken Composer to a project manager. The project manager is not supposed to be doing all of the jobs, so it's supposed to be delegating it. So actually, you would use Composer with Dataflow to kind of orchestrate the data pipeline. So that's the difference between the two. So Dataflow is an ETL tool. Composer is an orchestrator.
Thanks, Asuka. And also, Dataflow is a fully managed platform to run Apache Beam, which stands for Batch and Stream, which is a MapReduce platform for data processing.
Any other questions? Go for it.
So in scaling, I'm not sure, what does it scale on? Is it like resource utilization or
so
what's your backlog looking like?
It looks at multiple things because we don't define the scaling metrics, it's auto-scaling. It looks at your backlog of how many messages are in some of these. So if you look, you can see this backlog is pretty big, right, in here. So it looks at that. It also looks at things like CPU utilization. So, if you've got one server and the CPU utilization is 100%, then you need more than one. Right, so it looks at a bunch of these things across, I think, 1 or 2 minute time frame, and then does the auto scaling.
Cool, thank you.
Another one.
Your raw data from the first slide,
Does each of those data inputs have the same weighting?
If I go to the first slide.
First slide, I think it was. That data source, do they have equal weighting, or is there a weighting bias, and can you change that weighting bias?
You can change the weighting bias based on your requirements for your business, right? So if streaming data is more important for you, then I'm sure you can configure it, to prioritize your streaming data. But for the purpose of this demo, it was all equally important. Another question.
Great presentation first. So I see that the pub sub acts more like a queue,
Yep.
and then you have topics. So
Yep.
let's say if the same data or event is to be consumed by some other consumer plus this data pipeline,
Yeah.
how would that work?
If the same data was to go through data flow and something else, right? So say you want a cloud function to work based on data inputs in PubSub. So PubSub is just a message queue. It can push to multiple serverless offerings. So you can push it to data flow. Well, we're actually doing a pull, right? And so we can do the same with cloud functions as well. And that shouldn't be an issue.
Just create as many subscriptions as you like on the same topic.
Another one.
Hi, great presentation. With the batch example, when you were splitting up the files to publish the pub sub, obviously you were running a script there from your laptop, but the diagram had a containerized file loader. Do you have any preference for what service you use to run those in? Like, are you using the serverless ones for that, or you prefer to go with GKE, or do you have any preference?
Well, it depends on the volume of data, really. So if you're going, if you're a big enterprise like a bank, then what I've seen is Kubernetes is always preferred. But if you're a bit of a mid-tier organization where you don't have as big a volume, then Cloud Run solves much of that problem. I've actually worked on problems where you're actually migrating workloads off Kubernetes into Cloud Run because that actually makes more sense sometimes.
Do they have any different considerations on when you're deploying to them?
Some of the bigger considerations is most around, what's the skill set in the team? Is it a developer-focused team, or is it a ops and dev-focused team? What kind of costing model do you want? Kube's you have to pay for your servers up front with Kubernetes as well. Even though you're doing auto-scaling, if you're doing zero, then you don't have benefits of Kube, right? So things like that.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and because you asked for a realistic example, one insurance company, they had their own custom encryption and decryption logic. Yeah. Of course, that's something which your app engine cannot do. So it had to be done in GKE. Yeah. Another consideration could be something like you're streaming it into a PubSub topic. So how much volume are you streaming really? It's based on that.
Yeah. Any other questions? Don't see any hands. One more.
I saw on your map you had Magnetic Island. You actually have somebody on Maggie Island working for you, do you?
We actually do, yes. It's an interesting story about how that office opened. We've got this concept of My Deal in Mantle Group, Kasna, where every employee, at the end of 1 year or 2 year, every yearly anniversary of an employee, we say we want to work on certain things that we're passionate about. These are the things that will help us do better in our work life, right? So someone requested that they want to move to Maggie Island and build an office there. And they were like, yeah, sure, sounds like a great idea. And that's how we've got a Magnetic Island hub. So.
Whereabouts in Maggie, out of curiosity? It's only 4 little villages.
I haven't been there, so unfortunately don't know where.
Yeah. I'm from Maggie Island, which is how I recognised it.
Oh, wow, okay.
Another office is in Queenstown, New Zealand.
Yeah. Pretty much. That wraps it up then. Thank you very much for listening to me. And I will pass it on to Esther. Thank you.